Thank you so much and good morning. So I just wanted to share a little bit about what happened yesterday at our pre-conference as just kind of some closing remarks. I will also echo some of the things that have already been said. So yesterday at our pre-conference, Bridging the Gap, Connecting Black Communities to the Green Economy, over 100 people participated in an intense agenda-setting conversation about defining the green economy based on principles of equity and justice. We had people from universities, labor organizations, environmental organizations, and entrepreneurs, as well as grassroots organizers, policy advocates, and neophytes who are just looking to deepen their engagement in this work. Participants discussed the current challenges that communities face, as my previous speakers talked about. We are in a country that gets its energy from production processes and facilities that are more often than not hazardous to the communities that are host to the operations, largely communities of color and low-income communities. Whether it's the TVA oil spill or coal ash spill, the BP oil drilling disaster, the Arkansas oil spill, or the death by 1,000 cuts that are communities communities who are host to the 400-plus coal-fired power plants across the country experience due to breathing air full of toxins or fishing out of mercury-contaminated waters. We have a dangerous relationship with energy production and its frontline workers, low-income communities, and communities of color that are bearing the brunt of that impact. We also generate 356 pounds of waste every year, and that largely goes into the backyards and at times the water supplies of communities of color and low-income communities through our harmful practices of either burying or burning waste. As per the theme of the Good Jobs, Green Jobs conference, the impacts don't stop at the host communities who are ingesting pollution from the harmful practices. These same waste disposal and energy production processes and facilities that produce them are also major drivers of the catastrophic climate change that we are already seeing today. People say that if we don't change our habits, we'll be on a catastrophic course towards climate change. For folks in communities across the country, especially in the Northeast affected by Sandy and Irene, and in the Gulf ravaged by hurricanes Rita, Katrina, Isaac, and onward, not to mention globally in places like the Philippines, Madagascar, and the Dominican Republic, I'm sure they would argue that the catastrophes have already arrived. Besides this extreme weather we have in countries and communities, we have countries and communities like the Maldives and places in the United States like Thibodaux, Louisiana, and Kivalina, Alaska, that will literally be underwater within 20 years, where whole communities are facing displacement. Any farmers in the room can also tell you that we have lands that were once fertile and brimming with abundance that are now barren, and scientists are saying that it's only going to get worse. All of this is in the context of communities with double-digit unemployment, people who are paying up to 50% of their income on energy costs, people who are underinsured in terms of their health and their property, people who are suffering from voter disenfranchisement and overall political marginalization, particularly in a political system where we know that moneyed interests drive way too many of the decisions that are made. All of these factors exacerbate the cycle of harmful impacts. However, we also talked about the solutions that we'll hear more about over these coming days. We highlighted promising practices rooted in our shared vision, including worker ownership models from the Mondragon co-ops in Spain to the equal exchange model in the United States. We talked about community-owned utilities that transition us from energy production processes that harm our communities to models that eliminate those hazards while creating jobs. We also highlighted the local food movements to reduce harmful pollution from transport while growing local economies and eliminating the existing gap between nutritious and affordable foods for Black communities and Latino communities. We highlighted zero waste initiatives that are safely recycling waste and creating thousands of jobs. We determined that an action plan to ensure that communities of color can actualize a vision of just and sustainable communities of color and low-income communities can actualize a vision of just and sustainable communities must encompass the following: the reframing and the redefining of a green economy which is contextualized within a holistic vision of just and sustainable communities, operating on principles that are already existing, such as the environmental justice principles of 1991, the Jemez principles of organizing, and the Bali climate justice principles, all of which were established through consensus-driven processes of large groups like the ones that are gathered here. We need increased support for worker safety and worker rights. We need targeted outreach to constituencies to be engaged more deeply, the constituencies that are currently not part of this process. We need support for a significant expansion of worker ownership ownership and worker cooperative models, as well as community economic development models from community benefits agreements to community-owned utilities and beyond. We need funding support for the realignment of organizing that includes developing scalable funding models that are asset-based and whole community focused. We need meta-funding mechanisms where there are intermediaries that provide access to funding for grassroots organizing and worker-based organizing in frontline communities. We need to support research initiatives that examine the barriers to participation in the green economy for certain communities, as well as research that documents technological and other solutions that advance sustainability. We need a definition of clean energy that does no harm to communities that are host to production processes and to others. We need to develop a legislative scorecard that looks at our elected officials and judge them based on equity and climate policies that they enact and make sure that they represent the interests of the frontline communities. We need to develop a pipeline of youth engaging in the sciences and other relevant fields, emphasizing integrating a historically and culturally relevant perspective for youth of color. We need explicit programs that advance youth entrepreneurship and leadership. And we need to make sure that training execution happens only if jobs are an endpoint. We don't want to, in a time where people don't have time and don't have the luxury of time, we want to make sure that when they are being trained, they actually have jobs at the end of that. And we also need campaign finance reform because we need to get money out of politics and make sure that politics represent people. So, we are pleased to be with you all over the coming days because a number of us have stayed after the pre-conference. And we look forward to linking arms and working with you all to address the aim of looking at these issues that may impact some communities more, but impact all communities. Through our collective action, we can ensure that for all of us, we uphold our mutual constitutional right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Thank you.